Hi, my name is Lindsay Hyde, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Butte Yuba-Sutter Water Quality Coalition. So in today's video, I'm going to do a brief overview of what the coalition is, and we'll talk about some success stories that have come from the coalition and the hard work from our local growers. The coalitions are set into place to enforce the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. The ILRP regulates the discharge from irrigated agriculture lands for surface and groundwater. This program is created and mandated at the state level by the State Water Resources Control Board. Underneath the State Water Board, we have the different regions, and we fall underneath the Sacramento Valley region. Underneath the regional water boards, we have the individual sub-watershed groups, and that is what our Butte Yuba-Sutter Water Quality Coalition is. If an individual grower decided to do their reporting requirements and pay their fees directly to the state, they would not receive any assistance with their reporting, and their fee per acre is about $1,000 an acre, as to where our local sub-watershed is about $2.50 an acre currently. So the coalition was designed to be a simple, less expensive way to comply with the ILRP. So we're here to answer questions and provide assistance with the ILRP requirements. We work directly with the monitoring staff and the ag commissioners to address exceedances in our areas. And we coordinate educational opportunities that focus on current water quality issues and the best management practices to avoid exceedances in the future. Here we have the membership requirements for BYS. So you need to keep current on your membership dues. You need to attend an outreach event for the year. You'll need to complete your farm evaluation survey, your irrigation and nitrogen management plan, and summary report if necessary, and also fill out your sediment and erosion control plan if necessary as well. Remember, these are annual obligations, so to remain a member in good standing, all requirements must be completed and submitted to the coalition by the appropriate due date. So on top of the reporting requirements for the coalition, we also have different monitoring sites throughout Butte, Yuba, and Sutter counties, and these sites are in place so that if there are any exceedances, we can set a management plan. So a management plan is an area where there has been an exceedance for 2 years consecutively. These areas are then monitored yearly to ensure that growers are using proper farming practices to protect our surface and our groundwater. Once a management plan has had 0 exceedances for 3 consecutive years, then that management plan is able to close. So as you can see on the graph over on the right-hand side, when the coalition was founded in 2004-2005, we didn't have a lot of management plans in place just yet. We were kind of getting things rolling. And as the years went on, we found more and more areas that had exceedances. And then if you look further to the right side of the chart, it looks like in 2016 to current, we've actually been completing the majority of our management plans. And in 2019, we're down to just having a couple management plans. So what this graph is showing here is that the farmers are doing their job, and they are really focusing to protect our surface and groundwater. So this chart is showing more than 1,100 water column and sediment samples that were collected and analyzed from 22 different water bodies throughout the Sacramento Valley region between the periods of 2012 to 2019. So to summarize, this figure shows that rare toxicity, which is less than 1% of all the samples, to algae and the water flea. These are species that are doing well, suggesting the protection of algae and zooplankton that are important food for the fish and the wildlife. It also shows no toxicity to the fathead minnow, suggesting the protection of a sensitive fish species, and shows low frequency of toxicity to Halilea, which is a shrimp-like invertebrate that feeds on algae and is a major food source for our waterfowl along the Pacific Flyway. So this is just another example of a success story that the local growers have been putting forth through the coalition. So now we'll talk a little about exceedances. So what happens when there is an exceedance? BYS handles all of the communication and outreach regarding the issue. So we work with the Regional Water Board to satisfy their outreach requirements. We work with you, the growers, to let you know that the exceedance has happened and provide you with the best management practices to reduce the risk of an exceedance occurring in the future. Currently, the exceedances that we have in our coalition are both at Gilsizer Slough for chlorpyrifos and diazinon. And then here we have some examples of the best management practices on how to avoid future exceedances. So some of the options are use end of row shut off outside booms when spraying near water bodies, avoid spraying before a rain event or an irrigation cycle, and most importantly, train your employees on these practices too. Remember that the more exceedances we have means the more monitoring, which means we have increased cost. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to myself or Justine Dutra at the Yuba-Sutter Farm Bureau. The Gilsizer Slough drainage has two active management plans, one for diazinon and one for chlorpyrifos. The diazinon management plan was triggered in January of 2020 as the second exceedance in a 3-year period. The management plan for diazinon in Gilsizer Slough was submitted to the Central Valley Water Board in June of 2020 and has not yet received approval. Implementation of the management plan will require BYS staff to send out focus outreach surveys for diazinon, just like those sent to track the management practices of those applying chlorpyrifos in the drainage in recent years. The chlorpyrifos management plan was triggered back in January of 2015 and has been the target of outreach and education activities to remind growers and applicators to implement pesticide application and cultural practices that avoid or reduce the movement of chlorpyrifos from its site of application. The chlorpyrifos management plan is estimated to be completed in the fall of 2021. Coalition monitoring in Gilsizer Slough during the 2020 monitoring year, the period that extends from October 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2020, only observed one exceedance of a water quality objective, that being for diazinon. The January exceedance was less than 3 years since the last exceedance, which was observed in January of 2018, so a management plan has been triggered. No exceedances for chlorpyrifos have been observed during the 2020 monitoring year. This time series plot of diazinon measurements in Gilsizer Slough shows past exceedances that triggered a management plan in 2007. Additional exceedances occurred over the next few years, and the management plan wasn't deemed completed until July of 2016. Remember that once a management plan is triggered, there must be 3 years of monitoring without any exceedances and documentation that management practices were implemented in the drainage before the management plan can be deemed completed by the Central Valley Water Board. Diazinon and chlorpyrifos are similar in that they both have chronic and acute water quality objectives. The chronic objective is associated with an organism having a 4-day exposure to the pesticide, whereas the acute objective is associated with a 1-hour exposure to the pesticide. The second to last exceedance in January of 2018 exceeded the chronic objective, but just missed exceeding the acute objective. The exceedance in January 2020 was quite high and exceeded both objectives. This time series plot of chlorpyrifos measurements in Gilsizer Slough shows the long history of exceedances observed for this pesticide. Fortunately, there has not been an exceedance since August of 2018, and based on the recent focused outreach survey results, only 5 growers reporting applying the pesticide in the Gilsizer Slough drainage area. This reduction in the number of growers using chlorpyrifos is likely due to the pesticide's state restricted material status and the fact that it will no longer be able to be legally applied after December 31st of 2020. In the past, growers and applicators in the Gilsizer Slough drainage did a great job applying the diazinon without contributing to any exceedances from March 2011 through August of 2017. Be vigilant in maintaining proper pesticide application and cultural practices that are known to avoid or reduce movement of pesticides off your property, and be sure to fill out the focus outreach survey that the BYS staff will be sending to you. With respect to the chlorpyrifos management plan, we are in the home stretch. Be very careful when applying any remaining chlorpyrifos that you may have in your possession. Chlorpyrifos can no longer be legally applied after December 31st of 2020. Again, be sure to fill out the focus outreach survey that the BYS staff will be sending you.
Hello, I'm Franz Niederholzer, UC Cooperative Extension Orchard Farm Advisor in Clusa and Yuba-Sutter counties. Today I'll be talking about practices that reduce pesticide losses from orchards, especially during the dormant season. But the information is valuable for the whole season. I'll focus on keeping diazinon out of creeks and sloughs, as diazinon levels in Gilsizer Slough have triggered regulatory action. In this short talk, I'll cover factors that influence pesticide loss from an orchard, particularly diazinon again, like I said before, how nozzles and droplets influence pesticide loss through drift, and then briefly review sprayer calibration. I'm going to cover two primary pathways of diazinon loss from orchards: through runoff after spraying, where the diazinon is dissolved in the spray water and moves out of the orchard in that water, and then drift during spraying, where the diazinon in spray droplets is carried out of the orchard in the air and lands in the water directly adjacent to the orchard. Avoiding pesticide runoff events is a major step in controlling excessive pesticide levels in surface water. I'll start the talk by addressing pesticide runoff mitigation and with a focus on diazinon. A dormant spray leaves a lot of diazinon or other spray, whatever's in the tank, on the orchard floor, just because there isn't a leaf canopy to catch the spray, and you need complete coverage, so it's not that good a target, and quite a bit of it ends up on the orchard floor. Whereas in the season, you can still lose a lot, 20 to 25% of the pesticide on the orchard floor, but quite a bit more ends up in the tree on the leaves. So research from UC Davis shows that diazinon levels in runoff water drop very quickly within just a few days after the spray event. So and in this slide you see the horizontal lines represent 50 and 80 parts per billion thresholds for regulatory action from several years ago. That's the target you're trying to stay under when spraying diazinon in the dormant spray. It's not very much diazinon, 50 to 80 parts per billion. A single part per billion of aspirin is when you dissolve one aspirin pill in an Olympic-sized pool. But these levels can affect life in rivers and streams, so need to stay under those levels. So from this graph, you see that if you can have 7 days between the time you spray and a runoff event, that keeps your runoff diazinon levels under those thresholds. If it's a miserable wet January, you might want to consider changing spray materials or moving your timing closer to bloom, because it's pretty hard to find 7 days between a spray application and a runoff event. Changing when you spray and what you spray is a difference in your program, and that can be a little unsettling, but a lot of work's been done to prove that alternatives to dormant spray diazinon control the pests that spray targets. A dormant spray in peaches targets peach twig borer, leaf curl, and scale. Your effective alternative programs for dormant pests in a wet winter: for curl, the peach leaf curl, you can put Zyram or copper on early. That's late November, early December. And Zyram at bud break is also effective Zyram at bud break is good for wet, rainy winters. Dipel or other BT material in your bloom spray will control peach twig borer. Also Intrepid at delayed dormant will control the peach twig borer. And finally, for scale, check dormant spurs to see if scale control is needed. Only about 20% of orchards, in my experience, in any one given year actually need scale control. And if you do need that scale control, an alternative to diazinon is an insect growth regulator like Centaur or C's, and the delayed dormant is really effective for controlling scale. The bottom line, diazon before rain on wet saturated ground risks pesticide runoff, stream contamination, and regulatory action. So spray as soon as dormant spraying season starts. Hopefully that's ahead of rain. Check with your PCA. When the storm window opens, shut down and change your plans. Either wait till sometime other than dormant, or wait till the rain forecast is gone. And consider gear up and throttle down spraying in the dormant. There's more on this practice later on in this talk and from other sources. So we've talked about runoff, managing runoff from orchards, but managing spray drift is also important, and it's a balance between controlling pests on the farm with as well as with off-farm pesticide losses. Spray drift happens when light drops are carried from the orchard on wind and or with the fan air from the sprayer. The two keys to reducing drift are using medium to large droplets, avoiding small stuff, and limiting air movement away from the orchard that's either in wind or sprayer fan. Small droplets stay airborne and travel a long distance in a slight breeze. Just some examples of droplet size and distance that they travel in a 3-mile-an-hour wind, which is not much wind, when they drop 10 feet. As you can see, the really small stuff, fine droplets are 100 microns or less. They'll go at least 50 feet in a 3-mile-an-hour wind to drop 10 feet. If they're released from, say, 20 feet, it's going to take them about at the same rate, about 100 feet to drop out of the air, and that can be quite a distance from the edge of an orchard when that's generated on the edge of an orchard. The heavier droplets, the 200 to 500 microns, don't travel very far, as you can see from that right-hand column. So use larger nozzles to produce larger droplets and reduce drift. D6, D7s, and D8 nozzles produce larger drops than D3, 4s, and 5s. When you use a 4-hole spinner plate or core, that produces larger droplets than a 2-hole spinner plate with the same nozzle on the end. Spray is going to move where the sprayer's fan output goes. So use just enough air to get the job done, but not something that's going to push spray beyond the target like you see in this extreme picture here. To save money and reduce drift, use less air when you're spraying in the dormant versus in-season spraying. A low gear on the sprayer fan reduces air movement. Less tractor RPMs and PTO or spray engine RPMs. And faster ground speed helps reduce air moving laterally out into the orchard. For basic spray calibration, just a quick review. The gallons per acre is the gallons per minute, or your spray rate, over acres per minute, which is the land rate. So to determine your spray rate, the gallons per minute that the sprayer is putting out, fill your sprayer all the way full, run it at your standard operating pressures and RPMs, clock, measure that output for a minute or two, and then determine you filled the water back in with the buckets or with a flow meter, how many gallons per minute were put out by the sprayer in that way. And then for acres per minute, measure your ground speed in the orchard with the tractor half full, the sprayer half full of water, clean water. Measure the ground speed and in feet per minute. Multiply that by the width of from trunk to trunk in the row. That'll give you acres per minute that your sprayer is traveling. And dividing the two gives you gallons per acre. That's a really quick overview, but that's for simple basic calibration. You want to make sure you're putting out the right concentration of pesticide to get the job done. So general viewpoints: don't spray within a week of rain. When you do dormant spray, keep pesticide in the orchard using big spray drops, fast ground speed, and be particularly careful on the edges where the sprayer fan can blow stuff out of the orchard. Here's a couple of sources of information on gear up, throttle down, and spraying. You can call me, or you can check this website. Thanks very much.